glorious so-called revolution. The Stuarts are going to end with a lady called Queen Anne. And some of this stuff I may have mentioned before, but it's worth reiteration if, in fact, I have done so. She is the last of the Stuart monarchs. And while Anne is queen, a couple things happen which are of note. First, in 1707, something called the Act of Union is signed, which is going to make Scotland officially part of this thing called the United Kingdom, as it is called today, right? The kings had been the same for both countries, but the countries hadn't been officially united. And that takes place in 1707 while Queen Anne is on the throne. Now, Queen Anne had several children, but they all died before she did. And so when Anne dies, the crown is going to go over to some of her cousins, and a new dynasty is going to begin. And this dynasty is called the Hanoverian dynasty, H-A-N-O-V-E-R-I-A-N, because the kings are Germans who come over from one of these little German principalities. Remember, there is no Germany as we know it yet, called Hanover, H-A-N-O-V-E-R. And the first three of them are all going to be called George. You know about the third one, because of the little thing called the American Independence and the Revolutionary War. But the first George, who becomes king in 1714, he'll be on the throne until 1727, is actually a German. He comes over, doesn't speak English, right? But because of his lineage, he is the next in line for the English crown. He comes over to England and he sort of looks around and he says, "Auf Lieber," and he takes the money they give him. Because there's something called the privy purse, right? If you're the king or queen of England, you are given money by the state. This is still true today, although they don't like giving Elizabeth II all this money, and it's always a bone of contention every year. He goes back to Germany, and what this is going to do, this Hanoverian dynasty, at least the first two Georges, is allow Parliament to have a lot of power. And the modern British political system as we know it is going to grow up in the 1720s, 30s, and 40s. Because basically the first two Georges, and George II comes to the throne in 1727, and he's going to last until 1760, he basically has the same attitude. He's a little bit more anglicized. He does speak English, I believe. But basically these first two Georges don't care about England. They care about Hanover. They take the money and they go home, and basically they're Germans. It's going to be George III in 1760, who is really English. And he is going to try and rule as well as reign, is how they put it. The first two Georges were willing to take the cash and be king. It's good to be king. But they didn't really care about running England. It's not until George III after 1760 that this is going to cause some problems. Basically because in the several decades before, the Parliament had basically run the show. And what grows up in these years is the system, as I mentioned, the modern system. You get the first so-called prime minister, right? Pay attention to current events, you know anything about England, right? They have this fellow, their sort of president, is called Prime Minister, P-R-I-M-E-M-I-N-I-S-T-E-R. And this system, it's not written down anywhere, right? We have this written constitution, about which I'll say more probably by the end of class. And in it, it says, there shall be an executive branch, there shall be a president, right? He should be a certain age, he'll serve these terms, blah, blah, blah. In the British Constitution, this stuff isn't written down. The position of Prime Minister develops in the 1720s, 1730s in this political vacuum in which the parties sort of take control, particularly in the House of Commons in England. There's two parties, which I think I mentioned before, right? The Tories, T-O-R-Y party, and the Whig party, W-H-I-G party. These two parties are sort of vying for power. They're not really parties in this period as we know of political parties. They're more like political factions, right? But they're both looking to have as much power as they can. And the Whigs in this period are going to become predominant.